Good morning, good evening, and welcome to World of Warships. My name is Robin, and today we will be sailing and reviewing the USN supercruiser Annapolis. But first of all, thank you very much for tuning in the video. I really appreciate it, and I hope you would enjoy your time here. Yes, Annapolis, again, I have featured this ship lots of times already, but what can I say? I am a big USN heavy cruiser enjoyer, and well, the game I have for you today is a real treat. This will also be my last video of the year, so I wanted to save the best for last, you know? Next year, I will do my best to try and review ships I have yet to cover on this channel, and possibly play a bit more of Legends if you would be so interested in that again. But for now, the star of the show is this spectacular looking ship, but also, in my opinion, hands down one of the most powerful and impactful cruiser in the entire game. Trust me, we will be demonstrating this point in the upcoming battle. So, go get yourself your favorite drink, some tasty snacks, sit back, relax, and without further ado, let's take the Annapolis to battle. And here we are, with the infamous Two Brothers Domination mode as our playgrounds for today. We got ourselves a northwest spawn near Objective A, and as any USN heavy cruiser captains would do, we are going to head towards cover, ideally as close as possible to capture zones. The various islands on the 1 and 2 lines offer some decent cover and opportunities for pushes or retreats, as well as decent crossfires into the cap. I forgot to display the matchmaking here during the recording of this replay, but teams consist of the usual tier 9, 10 and super ships, no carriers and a tier 10 submarine on each teams. The no carrier part of this lineup will allow us for so much more freedom of movement across these islands, and allow us to also properly use that terrain to hide ourselves from dangerous opponents while keeping line of sight with our targets. Only thing we have to worry about is the submarine, since this class tends to spawn on the same side of the map, or at least in a mirrored fashion. But our commander build is spec'd into faster reloading ASW strikes, which is very convenient for this battle. Regardless, we are pushing to our first position, which will be on the small D1 island. With us are a Hayate, U-2501, a Vermont and a Montana in the rear. Enemy Annapolis spotted on the other side of the map, but so are we. So, in a classic radar cruiser fashion, we wait for a few seconds and burn our first radar. And yep, enemy submarine spotted. Unfortunately, too late for our shells to have any effects, even if we switch to burst fire before he fully submerged. But at least we know he will be operating in this area, and our ASWs are actually going to score a direct hit, which is a decent start. The A-cap is also being secured by the enemy team, and with the submarine now in the depth, our RPF will switch to that. So, as we anchor down next to our rock, we will be waiting for a little bit more information before we push out. On our flank, I already spotted an enemy Mecklenburg and a Montana with more high-velocity AP shells flying off from our direct front, indicating the presence of yet another battleship. I am patiently checking for oil leaks after friendly Vermont's ASW dropped on the sub's last known position, but it seems that no hits are scored, but shortly after, my RPF switches and I'm spotted again. We get a very quick glimpse of an enemy Johann de Witt, but we hold our fire. It seems there is a lot more activity on this flank than we initially thought of. Even some Preußen fighter planes are briefly spotted. And while both teams, Hayate, are going to face off in the cap, we take a more cautious approach. I am just really concerned about that sub. Even if my hydro is running, it will only spot the US boat at 2 kilometers if he is fully submerged, and I am at risk of being shotgunned. So, I am trying to make it as inconvenient as possible for him by keeping my APF marker pointing right at the island, hoping my hydro picks him up before he gets a proper line of sight. Johann de Witt also trying to root out our position with airstrike, and he is spotted pushing quite aggressively towards our position. Time to engage, I guess, but we cannot hold that island anymore. We need to try and retreat, possibly wait for our own submarine to get his submarine civilians off cooldown and help us out here. But we have to go. Torpedoes to port. All 6 have been fired and shortly after we get pinged. Thankfully they are way off target, even if we are forced to instantly use our damage control to prevent the homing. But we are safe, in a way. We have just under a minute before the sub's torpedoes are reloaded, enough to get us behind the next cover. In the meantime, we will be facing off against the Dutch cruiser that is definitely hell-bent on charging us. I am also keeping a close eye on enemy battleships' crossfire. It is very easy to get caught in the wrong turn when you're busy with more immediate threats, but I guess that's just cruiser life. It's like being on a motorcycle. If you don't constantly pay attention to what's going on around you, you will eventually get nasty surprises. And it doesn't fail. We angle against a Mecklenburg AP salvo just in time. Johan DeWitt realizes he's trying to bite more than he can chew and proceeds to turn away. That's our cue for a rear gun AP burst fire, enough to secure our first kill and remove a bit of pressure from our back. Granted, the enemy sub is still at large and all of our subsequent attempts at ASW strikes have failed so far. We still have a pretty clear idea of where this submarine is though. This is why APF is so valuable on radar cruisers. And once again, placing an island between me and the threat will have to do the trick for now. We are going to burn yet another radar to perhaps try and catch him surfaced, but no luck on this. Enemy Hayate gets revealed, breaking away from the cap to chase our own sub. Just enough for one salvo, but we are going to get lucky. The few shells that hit the Japanese destroyer actually managed to detonate it, and at the very same time our friendly sub burns his surveillance consumable finally, locking down the position of that creepy Gato. I guess there was another attempt at shotgunning me, I assume. This time we won't miss our ASW strike buddy. And as the US submarines try to resurface to escape surveillance, we are ready with a full burst fire to make more than sure he goes down for good. This cleans up the flank a little, hey, and opens up the A cap as well. With under 1 minute before a brewing cyclone arrives, it is about time. Some lucky torpedo dodge here. During this engagement we also lost our Hayate on this flank and another battleship at B. Our team is still holding up okay though, but with only our home cap in our control, the enemy team has already acquired a small but inconvenient point lead. On our side though, we still have to deal with the enemy Preußen and a Mecklenburg, but with our own U-2501 in the area, they are sure to remain spotted and harassed for basically the rest of the game. Even if it is a great start for us with already 3 kills and 70,000 damage, we are going to lose both our gearing and Montana, almost back to back on the B cap, further widening the point difference. We should be able to get A with no resistance, even though our sub refuses to take a small detour to both replenish his dive capacity and contribute to the points. But it is what it is. He will be off chasing, kiting hydro battleships in a cyclone instead. Anyhow, with the Mecklenburg outside of my firing range, I will be playing with fire just a little bit to try and get a couple of free salvos on that Preußen. The second one being just a little too close from spotting me and taking a spanking in return from these 457mm guns. But that second volley actually sets a double fire on the German battleship, which seems to be sticking, so I would say it was worth the risk. Now, if you have paid attention, you would have noticed a sudden switch in my APF position, and if you can read the minimap a little, you would also have assumed that the enemy Montana is making a push through the channel. Combination of his last known position, distance with Preußen, and the fact that the culprit number 2, enemy Zhao, is spotted next to B. Yeah, that's him right here. And as we enter the A cap, I prepare myself to counter that push. Meanwhile, the enemy German battleship has been cooking, granting us a fair amount of damage, and both friendly Vermont and Takahashi are moving in to assist with the cap. Now, doing it concealed and without sailing into a position that prevents me from turning out would have been preferable, Takahashi, but I won't blame you for that, and with just a few seconds left on securing the cap, I will engage myself. The Preußen is on its last leg and we can try to finish it off. Bit of a clumsy play here. We end up ramming the Takahashi, being flat broadside to the Mecklenburg at the same time, and while we burst fire our way to our 4th kill of the game after securing the cap, we narrowly avoid a pretty nasty salvo that could have been much worse than the 6k we get away with. But now it's time for Montana. The USN battleship is almost full HP, and we'll be facing off against our own Monty, which hopefully keeps him busy long enough for us to wither him down with a relentless barrage of 8-inch guns. And well, it is time for some close quarters, cause that cyclone is now in full effect. So far, both teams have lost 5 ships each, but the early point advantage the enemy team had is now being sourly felt. 300 points is a lot to catch up with, and also puts us on a pretty serious timer. We are in no position to attack either B or C, and now we are also forced to defend our home cap. Some slight hesitation on how to approach that Montana brawl, but I decided to switch all guns to port in order to create the widest possible crossfire, also allowing us to stay as close as possible to the action, not to be out of position after we managed to take the Montana out. And here goes the super heavy armor-piercing shells. I don't think the US battleship was expecting us here, and his broadside is about to get seriously chunked down, with one of our initial salvo landing for 15,000 damage. Thankfully, at least for us, his guns are pointed the other way, so we are able to get the full weight of our own broadside every 5 odd seconds, with only taking some secondary return fire in exchange. Unfortunately, we are not going to be able to save our friendly battleship in time, and with him taken down, I am the only one left with line of sight on this cyclone, hence the only one able to fight the enemy Monty. Though we have damaged him so extensively that we should have no issues taking him out. A bit of angling never hurts though. Annapolis' 30mm casemate can bounce 406mm guns, and as the Montana brings his guns to bear, we finish him off with a frontal burst fire. Kraken Unleashed, high caliber. By itself the game could have ended in a loss and I would have been satisfied with this attempt, but our work is far from over. While brawling the Montana, the enemy team has killed both our Minotaur on B and Takahashi on A, leaving only our submarine there to defend the cap since the friendly Vermont was trying to come back to help in our home cap. Not complaining though, Montana wasn't the only enemy coming from that side, with Annapolis already at the door. We also get surface spotted in a cyclone with a radar ship. That only means one thing: Yamagiri and Loria caught, and we start blasting. We are in a real pickle here though, but to be honest, Annapolis absolutely shines in these tense moments when the enemy team gets a bit overconfident and starts pushing into you. A few hits on Yamagiri grants us Confederate, triggering the Halsey special skill and increasing our DPM. We go out of the way of her torpedoes, but more unfortunately for us, the Japanese destroyer actually gets away, even if we managed to bring her quite low. This could prove to be a real problem later on, but at least she will be licking her wounds away from the fight for a while. Our radar also catches the enemy Marlborough, but we don't realize it in the heat of the moment. It will leave a marker on the minimap for us anyway for her last known position. We could dip forward and try to escape through the channel, but that would be leaving our Vermont facing off against 3 enemy ships, and that surely would not go well for him. So instead, we reverse our ship and try to meet with Loria. Meanwhile, friendly submarine goes down, and Mecklenburg, escorted by the Zhao, have made their way all the way back to A. Talk about being surrounded, right? On the bright side, the Vermont manages to finish off enemy Annapolis, and Loria, parked flat broadside below 5 kilometers, is about to understand that her HP pool is insignificant in that situation. And to make sure we don't take any more damage than we need to, we burst fire the Italian battleship down. No time to dally though, we still have some plays to make, and with almost 400 point difference and no way to contest the A cap whatsoever, we are dashing forward into the channel in hope of killing Marlborough, capture C and take it from there. I am leaving Vermont alone though. Even though our friendly Yamagiri is still out there, she will be trying to find and maybe finish off the enemy one. So our USN Brick will have to try and secure Delta on his own, then come back to defend B on his own. After a mutual agreement in the chat, that basically is our only plan to attempt on salvaging this game. My APF is locked on Marlborough, and it doesn't take long before we meet face to face. Out of all the battleships in the game that I could have been facing, this is possibly the least scary. While her HE shells could hurt, her AP doesn't overmatch any parts of my ship outside of superstructure, and at this range she will only get one full salvo off. And after a few volleys of both HE and AP, we finish the British battleship off in a quick and decisive trade. 3 versus 3, but the enemy team is also 3 minutes away from winning by points. The battle timer mod unfortunately does not work on replays, but this was about the amount of time we got after killing Marlborough. Once again, I will be faced with a dilemma. Do I keep sailing back to A but allow the Mecklenburg and Zhao to just take B for free and potentially 2v1 the Vermont? Do I turn left and assist the Vermont in the cap, then face off the remaining forces together? I am not entirely sure what is the best option at this point. All we can do is save ourselves a little bit more time to take these decisions. We have an open window on winning that game, we just can't afford to miss it. I decide to use my last radar in the hope of catching some information about the German battleship and IGN cruiser. I thought I had the range to acquire at least one of them, but they are both pushing B from the sea line, it seems. So, I realize there will be no time to get A back. We have to forget about this cap entirely. And instead of going around the whole island cluster again, as Vermont touches the cap and updates the timer, I decide to turn back around and go through the channel again. Using this last radar could have been a mistake. Might have come in handy against the Zhao or Yamagiri, depending on where she sails to now. I just assume our own destroyer also has APF and is actively hunting her down, knowing that she was last seen on very low HP. Securing C and blocking D gave us a total of 4 more minutes to play with, which is essentially the remaining time on this battle anyway. And with 1 heal and a couple of sonars left on my consumables, I set sail to our home cap. It is not often that you pull off a double Two Brothers channel rush in a cyclone, hey? But in the end, this seemed like the better option. As the cyclone actually starts withdrawing, the spotting ranges go back to normal and Mecklenburg is briefly spotted outside of the cap, meaning that the Zhao is already in it. Vermont, playing his cards extremely right, is already in a position to sail back to B and contest the German battleship best he can, but with Yamagiri and Zhao he will be facing some nasty torpedo crossfire. We are trying to help by lobbing some shells over the rocks, resetting just a little bit, but the Vermont salvo, oh yeah, absolutely crushes the remaining HP of Mecklenburg, prompting us to send one last burst on her path that will luckily take her out before she can cause more harm. Simultaneously, our Yamagiri managed to trade ships with the enemy one after chasing her all the way to the corner of the map, a paramount trade that will actually make this game winnable now. With RPF locked on the Zhao and the Vermont communicating that he is still surface spotted, we know that we can catch the stealthy IGN ship before she manages to get away. If she does, I don't think 3 minutes would have been enough to compensate for the point difference, even with 3 caps now in our control. Sonar is active to preemptively spot any torpedoes, both for myself and Vermont, and as we round the corner of this island, there is the Zhao, caught completely broadside. Front gun burst fire away, saving the rear turrets in case we fail to finish her off, and while this salvo will be enough to destroy Zhao and actually win the game, our Vermont still goes down from Yamagiri's torpedoes, and while this battle ends in a victory for us, it was possibly the closest game I've ever had on this map with Annapolis. 355,000 points of damage dealt, almost 2 million credits earned, and about 90,000 XP gained. We achieved Confederate, Devastating Strike, Kraken Unleashed, and High Caliber out of almost 400 shell hits, 3 airstrike ASW hits, 12 fires, and 2 floodings, sinking 3/4 of the enemy team in the process. And yeah, over 4,000 base XP, a ridiculous amount, but also fitting of the performance we pulled off in this game. MVP is also going to Yamagiri for delaying the flank at B and hunting down her enemy counterpart, and Vermont for making the most out of his ship, nailing the right targets at the right time, and being very aware of how desperate this battle was. Overall, one of my all-time favorite game in one of my all-time favorite ship. These guns absolutely shredded our targets, regardless of their classes. And even if I have to admit we used that burst fire quite a lot throughout the whole battle, our hand was kind of forced given the race against time, and hopefully this was still a good display of how Annapolis can be commanded. With that said, this episode is coming to an end. Thank you very much for sticking all the way through. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, well, thumbs down, but stay tuned. Anyway, as always, there will be more content to come about World of Warships. Until then, you have a fantastic winter holiday, as well as my best possible wishes for the new year. See you in 2024 for more epic warships adventures. This was the Sailing Robin. Have a good one, and take it easy.